out, but the police have essentially been allowed to operate with carte blanche by the governor here. And we should note that a lot of the prayers that the water protectors are doing.
Hey, sister, forget the wakichi. Hey, don't acknowledge it. Don't acknowledge him.
The gentleman across the street is saying, "Fuck you, terrorists," to the water protectors. And as you can see right here, the police are right behind me with looks like pepper spray canisters.
Veterans on the center, please. Veterans in the center.
Come on, please. Let's go. Nobody wants to get arrested.
Officer, what do you have the pepper spray for? Just curious. Yeah, they're not answering. So apparently there's a need for pepper spray in response to hundreds of peaceful protesters.
You know, that woman holding the cross did look pretty intimidating.
Yeah. Who are the bad guys here? Like, I know a lot of you pro cops, pro, corporations. Let's go multinational corporations. The CEO we heard from is worth $3.9 billion. Let's go billionaires, right? Right wing loves to protest in favor of those guys, apparently. But when you've got the stormtroopers out there, look, the cops are following orders. I know it's not always an excuse. It's the governor that's making the decisions and working with the corporations, et cetera. And they're middle-class guys, those cops. But, I mean, when you put on the giant stormtrooper outfit and you've got your mask on and you've got all your weapons on and you see people with prayer sticks and crosses and stuff, and you feel good about that? Is that you're like, yes, let's go crush some peaceful protesters. I've got my stormtrooper mask on and I'm ready to go.
Yep.
Like, who looks like the good guys and the bad guys there? But they don't see it. They look at it and they go, those heavily militarized guys are protecting the peace.
Yeah.
And the peaceful protesters that are praying are the real problems in this country.
Think about all of the various obstacles that stand in the way of these peaceful protesters. First of all, there's the issue of the media not covering this story. You don't see any coverage of it. Maybe a little tiny bit of a mention on some mainstream media outlets about it, but overall, there's no in-depth reporting on this issue. So that works against the peaceful protesters. At the same time, that allows those who are, part of these corporations to basically take hold of this narrative and spread this narrative that the protesters are violent and they're dangerous, and it just keeps getting, spread all over social media, and people just, they get turned into like these violent people when all they want to do is protect their drinking water. All they want to do is make sure that there are proper precautions taken and proper examinations taken before the construction is finished. And then finally, you also have the militarization of the police force intimidating the protesters from practicing their First Amendment rights. That's what's happening here.
Yeah, so Governor Dalrymple goes further and he's blaming the federal government. As CEO Kelsey Warren says, hey, maybe I'll pay the cost that the cops have in North Dakota. That's his way of saying, hey, I already bribed Trump. Maybe I'll bribe you guys by giving you guys more money. And they're saying, well, we don't know if we'll accept that. But the governor says, but the real culprit here is the federal government, because it's partially responsible for costs incurred to maintain public safety because of its actions and inactions surrounding the pipeline project. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you just already approved what the corporation wanted, instead of worrying about if the thing is going to leak and it's going to destroy the water, whose land it is, who cares about any of that?
Yeah.
We got money to make, so I'm going to put it on President Obama for not immediately approving the permit, and I want my money for that.
So let's think about this in broader terms, because you as a citizen who might be a property owner has to go through so many obstacles just to make an addition to your home, right? You got to take out the proper permits. They got to make an examination. There's zoning laws. Every little thing that you want to do to your own property needs to be examined by the government. They have to approve it. But when it comes to a corporation dealing with something like oil, which we've had severe problems with in terms of, tainting our drinking water or leading to leaks in our oceans and all that stuff, It doesn't matter. We don't have to do the proper examinations to get these types of developments approved. They get to move forward because they have the resources and the campaign contributions on their side. They can go ahead and bribe any politician they want to get what they want approved without the proper tests in place.
So, and the rest of the media had the excuse of, well, I mean, there's a big, exciting election going on. I can't go out there and spend money in covering a protest in North Dakota. We have just one reporter in the field, and we sent him to North Dakota before the election anyway, okay? Because it's an important story. It involves so many different elements, right? So first of all, the Army Corps of Engineers might have broken the law by not preparing a full environmental impact statement. Then the Corps turns around and says, okay, look, but they're not allowed to drill. Then the company says, I'm going to drill anyway. Unbelievable defiance. And then they're crushing these protesters. And then there's video, we've got it on video, of an instigator who comes in with a rifle among the protesters. They never found any weapons among the protesters ever. The only guy they find, it turns out, is working for the Dakota Access Pipeline. And he's got ID from them, his car's insured by them, etc. But yet the press is like, well, I see no problems here. No, I can't be bothered. But think about this. Well, whenever it was a Tea Party protest, press swarms. Oh my God, the right wing is protesting. The right wing is so important. What do they want? Let's give it to them. What do they want? Let's cover it like there's no tomorrow, right? Oh, it's the actual American citizens with no power protesting. Oh, they have no power. Why would we cover it? The disdain of the mainstream media it's so gross, and it drips from their mouths every time they will dismissively talk about violent protesters when there is no evidence of that. You guys are supposed to be reporters. Don't you have any shame at all? You know, by the way, where are they getting that talking from? They're getting it directly from the CEO of this company. Here, let's go to video 7 here. Here's Warren again.
And what happens to the protesters at that point? I mean, the ones that I've spoken to said that they are not going anywhere and that they are building shelters for the winter and they're going to wait this out.
The people of the state of North Dakota are generally wonderful people, law-abiding, nonviolent people, and they're trying to go about their lives. This has been such a disruption to that state. This is not a peaceful protest. So if they want to stick around and continue to do what they're doing, great, but we're building the pipeline.
Wait, how is it not a peaceful protest? And he's like, oh, the good people of North Dakota, their lives have been disrupted. What are you talking about? We've been there. There's nothing around there. It's not like there's a shopping mall there. It's not like there's houses around there. No, all there is the reservation and then now the protest of your pipeline. The only thing that has been disrupted is your profits. This guy's worth $3.9 billion. But no, he's got to get to $4.1 billion. So he's going to take those peaceful protesters and smear them. What happened? I thought Donald Trump talked about how we got to change the libel laws. You know, you just called a bunch of people they're non-peaceful when, in fact, they've been perfectly peaceful. Are we going to go to court over that? No, I got to make more money. I got to make more money. So and he says, they will not stop our project. That's naive. They're not stopping our project. The disdain that they have for the rest of us is immeasurable. Okay, so let me just add one thing to this.
Sure.
Okay. So check out more on TYT Politics. Jordan's been covering it for a long time there. A lot of great videos showing what's actually going on the ground. Also, Wes Clark, one of our hosts here, is headed out to Standing Rock with veterans. He's going to go out there to the Standing Rock Indian Reservation with Michael Wood Jr. He's a former Baltimore cop who's been on our show, and hundreds of veterans in support of Sioux Nation. How badass is that? That is super cool. Now, they are adamantly nonviolent, of course, and they just want to say, hey, these are the veterans who fought for freedom abroad. They want freedom here in this country as well, and they are going to fight against injustice as they were U.S. troops, and now as U.S. citizens, they're going to fight against injustice. And in order to help out with all those hundreds of veterans that are going to be able to sleep there in the cold and under really tough conditions, they set up a GoFundMe page. That's gofundme.com/veterans for Standing Rock, no DAPL. But we'll have that link below. So go check it out. These guys are warriors for peace and justice. If you want, go join them out there and help in any way that you can, because the media is not coming to help. Unfortunately, the local government and the cops are not coming to help. And soon the federal government will literally be in the bag for them.
That's exactly right. All right, there are other powerless people who are going to lose a tiny amount of protection they have against the financial industry. When President-elect Donald Trump was campaigning, one of the things that people were able to brush under the rug was his bigotry, his sexism, his misogyny, because they believed, as working-class Americans, he was the only candidate that would look out for them. Well, fast forward to today, and it seems as though the individuals that he is working with and people that he plans on filling his cabinet with have no interest in protecting the working class or consumers in America. Case in point, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created in 2010 and is the brainchild of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Now, a number of Republicans are pushing to basically dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Senator Richard Shelby, who is a Republican senator from Alabama, says, "My top priority is either to bring the consumer agency under appropriations, which would give Congress the power to shrink its budget, or bar it from spending money on certain activities, or abolish it. But we'll have to see what we can do. I think it's been a nightmare to a lot of businesses, small businesses, unbridled power, arrogance."
So there was a nice slip of the tongue there by Richard Shelby where he said, it's terrible for business, because those are his donors and the guys who pay him off. And then he goes, oh, right, I meant small business, because that's their talking point. They don't get any money from small business. They get money from giant businesses. These guys are protecting you from banks like Wells Fargo. You think Wells Fargo is a small business? No, Wells Fargo is a giant business. But those are the same guys who pay for Richard Shelby's campaign donations, independent expenditures, etc. So Richard Shelby is their dog. So he'll go out there and go, okay, yeah, my talking point says, yes, small business doesn't have money to pay a senator and to pay lobbyists. Big business does. That's who you work for. Be honest. So these guys are robbing us. Let me tell you the degree to which they're robbing us. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this is an amazing fact, returned nearly $12 billion to 27 million Americans. Now, the reason they did that was because they caught these financial companies running scams on you guys. And the companies had to admit, oops, that's a scam. They didn't, they could have fought it. If it was untrue, they'd go to court. They have an army of lawyers, right? They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and they're like, all right, fine. We probably still made more money off it. Let's just give the money, some of the money back. So 27 million Americans had been robbed by these bankers. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because it protects consumers, fought back for you and got your money back, $12 billion. But those banks look at that and go, that's $12 billion I had planned to steal from you and put in my pocket. And these meddlesome people protecting consumers, they took $12 billion of my profits that I was going to take from you guys unjustly. And I had to give it back because the government's out there protecting you. God damn it. Let's elect Republicans. Make sure no one is protected but the banks. Well, mission accomplished. So you think Trump is going to drain the swamp? No, right now they're rubbing their hands going, yes, there are no rules anymore. Now the robbers rule the streets. Take all the cops off, don't protect the consumers, and let's just go at it. So the Richard Shelbys of the world, who are the most corrupt people in America, they talked about Hillary Clinton's corruption. And I pointed it out. I talked about systemic corruption. So anybody who watches this show knows we hate it when the Democrats do it. But if you think the Republicans are on your side, the joke's on you. They can't wait to rob you. And now that Trump's in, they're like, open season on consumers, on citizens, on the powerless. Let's give all the money to our donors. So if you thought corruption was bad under the Democrats, wait till you see it on steroids under Trump.
But Cenk, I just feel like you're being a smug elitist by wanting to talk about what people are actually going to do with their proposed policies. Why are we doing that? Like, why don't we focus on how the middle class and the working class in America has been completely ignored by establishment politicians, and we just need a man who tells it like it is? Look, the entire election was so frustrating because, look, Hillary Clinton was not my favorite candidate. Obviously, like, we were very brutal to her during the primaries and even after the primaries. But to say that she was a corporatist, even though it was fair, is a ridiculous criticism when her opponent is part of that corporate world who's been benefiting from deregulation, who's part of the privileged upper wealthy class in this country that loves the system of government that we have in place right now and who hates what little regulation we managed to pass after 2008, right? The Consumer Protection Bureau was one of the good things that came out of that economic meltdown. And unfortunately, with Trump in power and with Republicans like Richard Shelby, and Roy Blunt having power along with him, they can do whatever they want. They're going to get rid of the one part of government that actually works right now.
So if you're frustrated by the establishment Democrats like Hillary Clinton and to some degree Barack Obama, I'm right there with you. You know, Obama created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, for which he should get a lot of credit. But he did a kicking and screaming. And Elizabeth Warren, who was the person who came up with the idea in the first place, everybody assumed that she would be put in charge of it, but Obama wouldn't do it because the bankers objected. So if you're frustrated by those Democrats, I'm right there with you. But if you think the Republicans are going to make it better, well, then you're totally wrong. It's one thing to say, it's binary thinking. Like, oh, my team, your team is bad, but my team's awesome. My team's great. Because Trump told me, man, I know I could trust him because he speaks in broken English. He speaks like a moron, so I know he's a real person. No, that's fake authenticity. That's fake populism. So he goes out there and speaks with a third grade vocabulary, and you think, okay, well, he's not a polished politician. I get it. You're right. Hillary Clinton, everything she said was scripted. I know that. But just because he speaks like an idiot doesn't mean he's honest. So you gave this guy a lot of power. And we told you about his foundation. We told you about everything he's ever done. So if you thought Hillary Clinton was corrupt, I hear you. But wait till you get a load of Donald Trump.
It's going to be way
First
worse.
thing he's going to do is hand off power to the richest people in America. So the next time they go to steal $12 billion from 27 million of you, and by the way, when they steal from you, they don't ask if you're a Republican. They don't ask if you're a Democrat. You think they're only taking from liberals? No, you're their first mark. The guys who trust the government, the guys, if it's a Republican government, the guys who trust giant corporations, come and see. We got great accounts for you. Come and see. Oh, yeah, you want to hand off power to Trump and the Republicans? Oh, wonderful. Come and see. Come and see. So don't cry when they rip you off, because that's what's coming next.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, disgusting stuff happening in prisons in Milwaukee. We'll tell you what when we come back.
All right, back on the Young Turks. I got a lot more anger coming at you guys. Including on the issue of economic terrorism. That's the story that I think is amazing. Coming up in a little bit. Okay, so Dan Cordobine writes in, how can there be law and order if there is no justice? Indeed. Well, we'll be seeking a lot of justice going forward, trust me. Tom Mahady writes in, if I were trying to drain a swamp, I wouldn't fill my entire crew with reptiles. Just saying. Damn. Tom Sherry says, America doesn't look like a liberal democracy anymore. It's devolving into a corporate police state. Unfortunately, there's some truth in that. In fact, that economic terrorism story is partly about that. And finally, Monkey with a Spoon says, fun. Jordan Chariton is the most legendary reporter there is. Absolutely no fucking about with this dude. Okay? Agreed, youtube.com/TYT politics. But I want you to know something. If you're a member of the Young Turks, you deserve credit for every story Jordan does because you paid for it. Okay, you're his boss. You asked us to hire him. You asked him to go cover those things. That was you. TYTnetwork.com/join. Be the boss of Jordan Chariton. By the way, speaking of those guys, I forgot to read the names over the last couple of days. So I'm going to do a quick 6-person member shout out here. Fergus Bauman is member number 1716. 1717 is Kate Naples. 1633 is Randy Brush, 1634 is Joe Whitaker, 1635 is Troy Ingram, and 1993 is Jude Baker. So you guys make this show happen. Thank you. And we'll have a fun post game for you guys today too at tytnetwork.com/join. And then, today's Thursday, Aggressive Progressives.
Awesome.
As well. All right, what's next?
All right. People keep dying in prisons and facilities that are supposed to be overseen by Sheriff David Clark in Milwaukee. The latest example included a woman who was imprisoned at the Milwaukee County Jail, and she apparently went into labor, and unfortunately, she alleges that The officers there did not give her the medical attention she needed, and she suffered severe consequences as a result. Now, she claims that her newborn infant died in the Milwaukee County Jail this past summer after a corrections officer allegedly laughed off her pleas for help as she was giving birth. Former inmate Sade Swayzer claims that she didn't get any medical attention for 6 hours after she first pleaded with a guard to help her as she went into labor. It took the jail an additional 2 hours to deliver medical aid to her newborn baby, who subsequently died later in the day.
So they're going to have to adjudicate this, hence all the words of allegations and alleges, etc. One thing that's not an allegation is her baby's dead. It died that day because it did not receive medical treatment. So I thought these guys were pro-life. What happened? And that baby was being born, and it was obvious. She's screaming in pain. The baby is coming out. Not going to help. A life? Who cares about that life? Every pro-life person in Wisconsin, let alone anywhere else, should be outraged at the people who oversee this prison. If you're outraged about abortion and now miscarriages, they're trying to make miscarriages illegal, or you got to bury or cremate the remains, etc. That's a new law proposed in Texas that we talked about yesterday. You want to make birth control illegal. That was a baby. It came out alive and it died. 6 hours while she was in labor, 2 hours after the baby was born. No treatment. So that's what she says, and the baby is dead. Now, if you're every pro-lifer, I assume, is right now getting ready to protest Milwaukee Sheriff David Clark, who oversees that prison. I mean, what kind of a monster would allow that to happen?
That infant was the fourth person to die in these facilities in the last 8 months.
In the last 8 months? That's unbelievable.
Okay.
This is not over the last 8 years, not over the last 8 decades. They let people die in that prison all the time. The one guy that we covered before on the show, that happened also in the last 8 months. He died of dehydration. I haven't heard of a person dying in America of dehydration ever in my life. And he wasn't stuck out in the middle of the desert and couldn't find his way home. He was under guard. There was guards all around him. And they refused to give him water. Not forget food, water, until he died of dehydration. How are those not criminal acts? The people that are in the prison, okay, I don't know what laws they broke or didn't break, okay. But the people that are running the prison are also criminals.
Yes.
If you let somebody die of dehydration, there's no argument that, oh, golly gee, maybe I should have given them water 3 days earlier. That was an honest mistake. Oh, I left him in a cave, in a hole, and I forgot to give him any kind of care, and he died of dehydration. That's not an honest mistake. That's a criminal act. A baby comes out. There's labor going on. You know what it is? It's because they're totally indifferent to your life.
Yes, absolutely, while they claim that they're pro-life. And so the one thing that I always want to bring up when these types of stories get reported is this lie that you see among the right wing when they say they're pro-life, that they believe that a fetus is a viable life and should be protected, when they say the moment of conception is when it's a life that needs to be protected. It's not about them wanting to protect lives. It's really about them wanting to punish women for engaging in sexual activity without the intention of getting pregnant, right? For them, a woman is only supposed to have sex if she intends to get pregnant. If she's having sex for pleasure, well, she deserves to be punished for it, right? If she's pregnant, she deserves to be punished. That's the reason why they favor legislation that would force a woman to carry a birth to term, even if the fetus has severe abnormalities. That's the reason why, in this case, a woman goes into labor, gives birth, and that infant doesn't get any medical attention for 2 hours after she gives birth. They don't care about the life of that baby. They don't care about the life of the mother. What they care about is the punishment, the judgment, and making that woman feel like she's a second-class citizen. That's the country that we live in right now. That is what we advocated for when we elected a disgusting person like Donald Trump. So congratulations, America.
And Trump is related to this story because they have this guy as one of the candidates for the head of Department of Homeland Security. Oh, you are brutal to the people that you imprison. You and sometimes their lives are lost because you don't care about their life at all. And then you wonder why they call it Black Lives Matter. Like, hey, can you please understand that our lives matter also? Because you're treating it like our lives don't matter. And they think, oh, congratulations, you shouldn't get a demotion for that. You should get a promotion to the federal level for that. So, look, in this case, this is the perfect microcosm of what Anna is referring to. Because if you're really pro-life, you'd want to protect that baby. But if it was really about punishing women, then you support Sheriff David Clark. You're like, way to punish her. Now, what the crime she did, it shouldn't have gotten the death penalty. And it certainly shouldn't have gotten the death penalty for her baby. But we gave that baby the death penalty because that'll show you. That'll show you. We never gave you permission to get pregnant. Now, know your role. Now, you can prove me wrong. Pro-life people, you go get Sheriff David Clark fired because you're outraged at what happened here. He oversees a prison. This is directly his responsibility. And we're not like the right-wingers. We don't want any kind of vigilantism against him. That's crazy. No, simple law and order. If people keep dying because you don't treat them in your prisons, you're not doing your job, hence you should be fired. Pro-lifers should circle that jail until the sheriff is fired and, by the way, investigated. Because these are crimes.
But pro-lifers have much more important things to do, like going to a Planned Parenthood clinic and holding pictures of dead fetuses and judging women who go there for contraception or cancer screenings or something that's completely unrelated to abortion in a lot of cases. That's what they have to do. Because again, it's not about being pro-life. If you're pro-life, you would go out of your way to ensure that Republicans don't cut programs that help hungry kids like food stamps, right? You would fight to make sure you protect them so they live a happy, healthy life and have the proper protection or foundation to be productive members of society someday in the future. You would fight to ensure that they have access to good education, but they don't care about that. They care about judgment. They care about punishment. Again, they care about controlling women and treating them like second-class citizens. That's what this is really about.
And hey, pro-lifers, feel free to prove us wrong. Okay, but if you are not opposed to what Milwaukee Sheriff David Clark did in overseeing this prison, and you're okay with that baby dying, then don't ever, ever call yourself pro-life again.
All right. Moving on to Republicans and how much they hate Muslims. Recently on Fox News, Megyn Kelly was speaking to a Trump supporter by the name of Carl Higbie. He's also a former Navy SEAL. Now, during the discussion, they were talking about how, there might be a registry for incoming Muslims or people immigrating from Muslim countries, just to keep an eye on them, just in case there's any kind of questionable activity. And Megyn Kelly was questioning whether or not that's really the right way to go about things, right? Do we have video of this, JR?
No.
We don't. Okay, so that's fine. I have his quote. So during the conversation, Carl Higbie was like, we have precedent that says that we can do this. And then he proceeds to give the example of internment camps here in the United States. He says the following: Higbie made it clear he thinks the vast majority of Muslims are not bad people, but because there are some who align with extreme ideology, it would be wise to keep tabs on people coming into the country from certain places. We've done it with Iran back a while ago, he said. We did it during World War II with the Japanese.
So it wasn't just an analogy. It wasn't just, hey, I think maybe if we were to do this in the future, it's not a hypothetical, it's not a thought experiment. No, we interned the Japanese, so why don't we just consider profiling, registering, and perhaps interning the Muslims? This is where we are. We had Newt Gingrich talk about we should bring back the Un-American Activities Committee, okay, in the House. So full support of McCarthyism. We had Claire Lopez, now being considered for one of the top posts in security in the Trump administration, talking about how McCarthy was spot on when he investigated other Americans. And now they're back to internment camps. And they're not shy about it. They're not abashed about it. To them, they're like, what do you mean? Of course, we don't like those people. They're a different race than us or they're a different religion than us. Well, of course we should imprison them. You want to talk about un-American? You're the most un-American piece of trash there is if you want to discriminate based on race and religion. The whole point of the country is that we don't make those distinctions. So even Megyn Kelly, Fox News host, was outraged. She said, you can't be citing Japanese internment camps as a precedent for anything the president-elect's going to do. And the guy was like, yeah, no, I can. So, no shame.
It's amazing.
So this is where we are, guys. So don't think that, hey, oh, he won't really do it. These are the guys he's considering putting in charge. He's about to do it. So we said it 1,000 times. The wolf is real. It's not a trick. He actually, and I told you, there was a book, Ascent, about Hitler. Now this actually is an analogy, okay? So I'm not saying he is Hitler. I'm not saying he did concentration camps. But when Hitler was rising, newspapers at the time said, oh, he's just a dunderhead. Oh, he won't do any of the things he says he's going to do. He's just trying to get votes by being a populist. Almost the exact same things they said about Trump. And they're like, oh, he's not going to do that stuff. Then why is he considering these monsters who talk openly about starting the internment camps?
On national television, completely transparent, completely open to the idea. It's kind of amazing. And the part of it that I always find interesting is the caveat / non-caveat that they start their arguments with, where they're like, I'm sure that there are some Muslims that are good people.
Yeah.
But just in case, let's make them all register and treat them as if they're criminals without any reasonable suspicion, without any of that. Let's just treat them all as if they're potential criminals. And again, you think about the lack of empathy, the inability to put yourself in anyone else's shoes, right? Imagine if you were part of that community and you're not accused of any wrongdoing, you have no ill intent, you're trying to flee your own country because it's, a violent, scary place to raise your family, and you come to this country where they make you register simply because of your background. And by the way, how do you decipher whether or not someone's Muslim or not? Anybody coming from a Muslim country has to register under these proposals.
So your dad came from Syria.
My dad was born in Damascus.
And so he's Armenian, he's Christian, but I don't know, came from Syria. Let's let's profile him, let's register him. And is it any better if they go, oh, no, it turns out Anna's dad is Christian. So we will assume that he's the right kind of person who could be an American.
And again, that doesn't make it any better.
Yeah. By the way, another Syrian immigrant was a guy who wound up being Steve Jobs' dad, and he was Muslim. So if you had registered him or you had kept him out of the country or maybe put him in a camp when he got in here, we never would have had Apple. I thought you guys were capitalists. What happened? Okay, now finally, let's note the irony that these were the guys worried about FEMA camps. So when Obama was in charge, oh, they're going to take right-wingers and put them in FEMA camps. First of all, let's note that the FEMA camps never happened. So what happened? You were wrong. Alex Jones, you were wrong. All you right-wing lunatics, you were wrong. It never happened because it was just your fantasy, because that's what you'd like to do to other people. So you thought we were as monstrous as you are. So you said, oh, I want to imprison my enemies because I'm not really an American. And I'm going to make decisions based on race and ideology and religion. So I assume the liberals will do likewise. But we didn't. We didn't because we're Americans. We love this country. We believe in our Constitution. The minute you get a chance, the transition team hasn't named these people, but these guys are all now being considered. And they're like, oh, if I get in, I can't wait to do the camps. They talked about FEMA camps, not because they were opposed to imprisoning people. It's just that they didn't want it to be them. They can't wait to do it to others when they get in.
That's exactly right. And they assume that other people think the way they do, right? And so when they accuse the Democrats or Obama pushing for so-called FEMA camps, it's because they think of what they would do if they were in power. And it's what they're, advocating for right now. All right, should we take one more break?
Okay, let's take a break. But when we come back, look, you guys got to come back because this is going to be, as pissed as I was about these last two stories, wait till you get a load of me on the economic terrorism story. Because if economic terrorism sounds disastrous to you, like that concept, it's actually worse than you think it is. And then Steve Bannon on being bitter that white people aren't as smart as Asians. Oh, you're going to love that. All right, back on the Young Turks. Vern writes in, Vern's a great name. The right wing loves to hate government control until they can use it to impose their will upon others. 100%, right? Leah Knight says, when Megyn Kelly says a rational thing I agree with, fuck, I want a refund on 2016. Rita Ann says, the wall, internment camps, these are the reasons people voted for Trump. No other reason. People are deplorable. No, you're not allowed to say that. Shh. No. You're not allowed. Basket of deplorables. You know, after the election, Hillary Clinton said the one thing she regretted was saying basket of deplorables.
Oh, come on.
They learn no lessons.
They really don't. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And Chuck Todd today was bemoaning that, or was surprised. Let's be fair to him. I don't know that he was quite bemoaning, but he was surprised that the Clintons aren't being mentioned anymore in the Democratic circles. Like he's like, he's like saying, why aren't we asking Bill and Hillary Clinton which direction they think the Democrats?
No, why would you do that?
Are you kidding me?
Oh my God.
Are you kidding me? They lost to Donald Trump. Now we're talking about internment camps. I'm going to go ask them for advice? I don't think so. But for the mainstream media, they think like, yeah, of course. Well, where do I turn? I turn to my beloved establishment Democratic
They're
friends.
so oblivious. It's incredible.
All right. Let's go forward.
All right. President.
I'm sorry. Oh, shoot. I interrupted
It's okay,
you for no
Ben.
reason.
Yeah.
No, I just meant to say, hey, you know what really worked during the election, and I want to keep it going every day, is sharing. So we're about to do 3 great stories, right? So share this if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Use the share button. Send the link around. Every time we're live, okay? Remember, you could watch it on your phone. You could watch it on your TV. You could watch it anywhere. Tell your family and friends. We're about to do 3 amazing stories about the right wing. The last one is super chilling. All right, let's go forward.
All right. President-elect Donald Trump was speaking to Steve Bannon on SiriusXM's Breitbart News Daily, a great program that you should listen to when you want to slit your wrists. And during their discussion, they specifically talked about people immigrating or coming to the United States to go to Ivy League schools and how a lot of them go back to the countries that they came from. Now, interestingly enough, Donald Trump thinks that we need to give them more of an incentive to stay here in the U.S. because they're the best and brightest and they could actually really help our society. He says when someone is going to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Penn, Stanford, all the greats, we throw them out of the country and they can't get back in. I think that's terrible, he says. Again, this is Donald Trump. We have to be careful of that, Steve. You know, we have to keep our talented people in this country. Now,
so can I just interject?
Yeah.
So these comments were made on November 5th of 2015. So that's in the heart of the run-up to the election, okay? So Trump's in the primaries. He's doing well. He goes on this show, and he's already railing against immigration. He wants to kick most people out. But he's like, look, if we're going to make money off of them, I am Donald Trump. So let's keep the guys in here that are rich or could be rich. Right? Now, look, a lot of people want to keep those folks. We also want to keep folks who came in here to work hard, who aren't already rich or going to Penn and Stanford, et cetera. But, you know, this is not the worst thing he said. This is, you know, overall, at least he's being honest about he does want to keep some immigrants in.
yeah.
So that's not the issue here. The issue is what Steve Bannon says afterwards.
Now, Steve Bannon was kind of like, wait, what? What? Like, you know, because he expects Donald Trump to not be in favor of anyone staying in the country. And so Steve Bannon responds with the following. When 2/3 or 3/4 of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are from South Asia or from Asia, I think a country is more than an economy. We're a civic society. So essentially what he's saying is, we got a little too many Asians and Indians
Yes.
living in Silicon Valley, and so and having high positions in tech companies in Silicon Valley. So we need to do away with that. More white people as CEOs. Now, let me give you the numbers before we comment on what he said. Now, in May of 2015, a study actually found that 27% of professionals working in Silicon Valley companies were Asian or Asian Americans. They represented less than 19% of managers and under 14% of executives. So no, 2/3 of them are not CEOs. Yes, there is a large chunk of the Silicon Valley workforce that's made up of Asians and Indians, but overall, No, they're not all CEOs. White people still have an advantage when it comes to that.
Overwhelmingly white CEOs, but not good enough for Steve Bannon because he sees some Asians and Indians over there. So let's break this down. So first of all, he says a country's more than an economy. In other words, even if they're rich, I don't really want them because they're not white. He says we're a civic society. And what's wrong with Asians being in a civic society? Why is South Asians being successful in America a bad thing for a civic society? Because if you see the context of Steve Bannon and the other comments he's made, he talks about how America has a Judeo-Christian heritage. So now some of those Indians are Hindu, some of the Asians are Buddhist. But really, he's not really inquiring much into their religion. For all he knows, they could be Korean and deeply Christian, right? No, but they're not really white. And that's a problem for him. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions of Steve Bannon. First is, are you crying? So are you saying, oh no, boo-hoo, white people couldn't compete with Asians? Please protect me, Donald. I wasn't smart enough to be CEO in the Valley. Now, Steve Bannon, believe it or not, has a good education, worked at Goldman Sachs, but now he's got demoted to running some, third-rate blog until Trump picked him up and put him in the White House, right? So, what did you not make it in the business world, Stevie? Oh, there's too many Asians. The next question I have for you, Steve, is would you like affirmative action for white people? Are you afraid you can't compete with Asians and Indians, so you need a little bit of affirmative action? We need more white CEOs. And if we just let the Valley pick on merit, they pick too many Asians. Please give me affirmative action. I'm Steve Bannon, and I've been triggered. I need a safe space.
Yeah, it's amazing, by the way. It's amazing because the same group of people in the country that say that they're in favor of like the First Amendment and free speech or whatever are the same people who get triggered by the simplest things, right? Who can't handle the notion of intelligent non-whites having high positions in American companies. And by the way, again, the numbers and the proof is in the pudding. It's not like, we have this prevalence of Asians or South Asians taking over as CEOs in Silicon Valley. That's just not the case. And even if it were the case, who cares? Why is that such a big deal? Now, look, if Steve Bannon wanted to touch on the issue of H-1B visas and how tech companies in Silicon Valley are firing American workers because they can take in these immigrants and pay them a lot less, well, then you have an issue there, right? But that would have to do with regulating corporations, something that I'm sure Steve Bannon has no interest in doing. But just simply hating people because of their background is something that he's in favor of. And so, yeah, So
that's a great point by Anna.
Yeah.
So don't make that weak sauce excuse about H-1B visas. These are CEOs he's talking about, and he didn't say visas. He said we need a civic society, okay? So, and in the other times, they use excuses like, oh, well, Muslims, I don't like them because they're a security threat. Well, in reality, there's 7 times as much right-wing terrorism in America as Muslim terrorism, but we don't call our right-wingers a security threat. It's an excuse to treat them as the other and to discriminate against them. Now they use words like global financial interests. What we're worried is that it intimates the Jews, because that is what it's meant in the past. Okay. You think, no, I don't think there's any such thing as coded words, etc. Okay, then let's look at this one. You told me all your life, right wing just means meritocracy. That's all we want is a meritocracy. But they come in here, these blacks and Latinos, and they want something for nothing, and they want affirmative action. And it has nothing to do with race. We just want capitalism, unfettered capitalism. We got unfettered capitalism, and in a meritocracy, some percentage of executives in the Valley are Asians and Indians. No, I don't want it. I don't want it. See, now it's naked racism. You forgot to put a fig leaf on it. So this guy is now the chief strategist for the president-elect. He's already been named. So if you're Asian in this country, or you're South Asian, understand who's in charge now. So if you think that this guy's your friend, he isn't. Donald Trump is nowhere near your friend. Remember, Donald Trump's on the program with Steve Bannon. It's not like Steve Bannon said this in some blog somewhere and Trump, oh, well, you can't hold him responsible. He probably didn't read it. He was on the air with him. Trump heard that and then hired him to be his chief strategist. Now you know. Don't say you weren't warned.
Let's talk about some more of Trump's advisors who are advocating for some pretty hideous stuff for the future of America. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn is one of Donald Trump's advisors, and recently he was speaking in Dallas for a group known as Act for America. That's a group that he's actually also an advisor for. And during his speech, he told the audience that Islam is, quote, a cancer and a political ideology that definitely hides behind being a religion, while also pushing a bogus rumor about creeping Sharia in Texas. Flynn also told the crowd that Bernie Sanders is an avowed communist. So you kind of have a sense of who this guy is.
Okay. So let's break this down. First off, that talk of cancer, it's really dangerous. That's the same kind of talk we heard in Europe in the 1930s, that a certain religious group was a cancer and they weren't fully human, and besides which it's not really a religion. And the reason that he says also that it's not a religion, it's a political ideology, is so that he can say, oh, I'm not discriminating against a religion. I just called your entire religion something else. So since I called it something else, I could discriminate against you. I can keep you out of the country, I could profile you, I could register you. And now some are talking of the internment camps in positive terms when we did that in World War II. It's okay. I'm not violating the Constitution, which says don't discriminate based on religion, because I just defined your religion out of existence.
Yep.
So, Michael Flynn, man, it's just his entire potential cabinet is a basket of deplorables.
That's exactly right. And people should say that without fear. They should say that unapologetically because it is what it is and it's the truth, right? You have Steve Bannon, you have Michael Flynn, you have all of these, establishment GOP politicians who have no interest in protecting the working class. So if you're part of the working class and you thought Trump was going to protect you, that's just not going to happen. If you're part of the working class and you brush the racism and misogyny and bigotry under the rug because you thought, hey, you know what, I'm really suffering economically, you're not going to get what you thought you were going to get. And look, it's a failure of the mainstream media for not reporting what the reality is. But more importantly, I think it's the failure of the electorate. And I think it's time that we all take responsibility for the lack of attention that we want to place on actual policies instead of, instead of the crap that the mainstream media covers and the crap that we love, the salacious shit that we covered so much, not us as TYT, but as the media covered during the election.
So if you think, well, when he came for the Muslims, I wasn't Muslim. He also sent an anti-Semitic tweet earlier in the campaign. But when he got caught with his hand in that cookie jar, he took that one back and apologized. He's like, ooh, yeah, that anti-Semitic tweet I sent with great joy. Oh, right. I'm not allowed to be anti-Semitic yet. So I'll take that one back. What I say against Muslims, I don't take that one back. And really, Sharia law in Texas? Really, you're this insane? So, okay, look, you know what, guys? If Sharia law takes over Texas, then I'll come and join your fight. I'll become a right-winger, and let's go fight them together. And by the way, in some ways, I mean that literally, because if Sharia law actually took over Texas, I would hate that. Sharia law is not something I want. I don't want any religion running us. I don't want Muslim Sharia law running us. I also don't want Christian Sharia law running us.
But
I want us to be a secular country like our Constitution demands.
But we already see Christian Sharia law taking hold of Texas, right? In the story that we covered yesterday on the show, you have right-wing politicians proposing legislation that would force women who are pregnant to carry a pregnancy to full term, even if that fetus has severe abnormalities and is not expected to live, right? So the woman has to go through the trauma of having a stillborn. The woman has to go through the trauma of giving birth to a child who has severe developmental issues and is not likely to live, right? A woman is forced to do that because of a specific religion. And so that type of extreme fundamentalist behavior is already happening. But while they're pointing to Muslims and saying, hey, look at the Muslims and look at what they're going to do to our women, behind the scenes, they're already fucking with your women. They're already treating their women like second-class citizens that need to be controlled and need to be punished because of the same sexual activity that they're in favor of engaging in. That's what's happening in Texas.
I just realized as you were talking, Anna, they're actually just jealous of the Muslim guys who do Sharia law. They're like, ooh, if we could subjugate our women that way. I mean, we're trying, but we're not as good as you guys at this. So look, more on Lieutenant General Flynn. He says that he studied the Founding Fathers for years. And that he said this Islamic ideology was something they wanted nothing to do with. And he says they were good Christians. You studied them for years and that's the conclusion you came up with? Thomas Jefferson literally ripped up the Bible. He would rip huge chunks of the Bible out and go, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, that's garbage. And he would literally throw it in the garbage and he'd just keep the good stuff. And there's good stuff in the Bible. So, hey, treat your neighbors as you'd like to be treated, and the Sermon on the Mount, etc. And it was called the Jefferson Bible. So you studied it for years and you missed that, you schmuck? Okay, so our Founding Fathers, when they became presidents, said this is in no way a Christian nation. They said that Muslims were just as welcome as any other religion. That is a direct quote from one of our Founding Fathers in a treaty that we signed. You missed that, Michael Flynn, in your years of study? But probably because he was out there in Texas looking for Sharia law when he should have been studying the Founding Fathers. He said, wow, I can find that Sharia law. Yeah, actually study, but you're not capable of it. You're not bright enough. So, by the way, this guy now being considered for National Security Advisor, one of the most important posts in America. Welcome to the new America.
Yep.
Does it sound like it's been made great again? Okay, one more story here.
All right. After Election Day and after the election of President-elect Donald Trump, a number of people in various states took to the streets to protest his election. Now, of course, a number of right-wingers are not too happy with the protests, so as a result, they have not only spoken out against it, but Republican state senators like Doug Erickson have decided that maybe we need to pass laws that have harsher penalties for people who engage in these types of protests. Now, Doug Erickson from Washington State sent out a press release announcing legislation to make economic terrorism a felony in the Evergreen State. So he is referring to these protests as economic terrorism. Because remember, this is right-wing 101. If something you don't like takes place, you immediately label it as terrorism. Now, the proposed bill would allow police to charge protesters who block transportation and commerce, cause property damage, threaten jobs, and put public safety at risk with a Class C felony. Similar charges would apply to those who fund, organize, sponsor such protests, and the bill would force such individuals to pay restitution up to triple the amount of economic damage done. So understand that a lot of people here at TYT are not in favor of protesters blocking traffic. You're already breaking laws that exist, and you shouldn't do that because let's say there's an ambulance, there's someone who needs to be rushed to the hospital. Blocking traffic is actually a gigantic safety concern. So I understand people who are upset at the vandalism, who are upset at individuals blocking traffic, but at the same time, what Doug Erickson is proposing is a form of intimidation. It's a way to discourage people from participating in their First Amendment rights, from being part of any type of protest. And to label protesters as terrorists is beyond ridiculous.
So let's break this down further. So it depends on how you do the protest, by the way. So sometimes traffic is blocked, for example, when you cross the bridge in Selma, Alabama. Well, that was a bridge that could have had cars and you blocked the traffic, but the cops knew you were doing that. They had already cordoned it off. In Washington, if you block traffic in Washington, D.C., the cops immediately cordon the streets off. They're used to it, and they route you around. Now, if it's in a place where people aren't used to it and you're just stepping in the middle of a highway, please be careful. Please be careful. But anything old that he's referring to, hey, if you break the law and you're violent or you set a fire you weren't supposed to set, etc., that's already illegal.
Yes.
So there's no need for it. He is referring to things that are not already illegal. So he's saying, here, let me quote some of the things that he says are problematic. Marching through public areas. But that's literally constitutionally protected. You have every right to do that as an American citizen. And if he says, if you block transportation or commerce, but wait a minute. When the civil rights workers sat on the lunch counters, well, you could argue they were blocking commerce.
That's right.
Because, hey, they said for you to move out, you're black. You're not allowed to sit in the front. You're not allowed to sit at the counter. That's only for whites. And you're blocking me doing business from good white people with you being black and all and sitting at these counters. That's it. You're an economic terrorist. They would have called everyone who sat at those lunch counters an economic terrorist. He also says that you're an economic terrorist if you, quote, threaten jobs. Now, if you're a Native American protesting or you're an environmentalist protesting in North Dakota, what are they going to tell you? Oh, well, you're blocking the jobs of these good guys laying down pipe for the drilling. Well, you threaten a job. Terrorist.
That's right.
So this would make almost every protest in America an act of economic terrorism. Now, another irony here. Remember, these are the same guys who just a couple of weeks ago thought that Donald Trump was going to lose. And we're talking about how they have to rise up against this crooked government and against the tyranny of that government. So they were ready to go in the streets. Imagine if Donald Trump had won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College.
Oh, my God.
Do you think they would have blocked traffic? Do you think they might have disrupted commerce for a little bit? They would have been all over the streets, right? And the Bundy boys, with all their weapons, that literally block traffic, they take over federal government property and said, they're not terrorists.
They're not terrorists.
They're not terrorists.
They threaten the lives of individuals while they're carrying their firearms. But they're not terrorists. They're not terrorists. By the way, let's talk a little bit about the types of penalties that people would pay if they were labeled economic terrorists under Doug Erickson's proposal. So first, let's do a little comparison. In Washington state, already intentionally interfering with or obstructing pedestrian or vehicle traffic can result in a misdemeanor punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 and or imprisonment up to 90 days. Under Erickson's proposal to make these activities a Class C felony, the same activity could result in 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine.
Okay. See, once you start putting people in prison for 5 years for political protests that aren't on your side. You love the political protests on your side. The Tea Party, I guarantee you, Erickson celebrated the Tea Party. When they were protesting all over, and sometimes when they bring weapons, good Americans, patriots. Oh, my political opponents, I'd like to put you in prison for 5 years. Well, that's a gulag. Now, look, he's in the state of Washington. There's a Democratic governor there, and one of the houses is Democratic. So this won't pass. But this is basically him saying, hey, here's a suggestion on the national level. And all of you Republicans, and the Republicans control 69 out of 99 legislatures at the state level. He's saying, I can't do this in Washington, but I'm putting you on notice. Maybe all the Republican legislatures in the states and at the national level, let's just start imprisoning our political opponents. And by the way, who does Erickson work for? Funny enough, it turns out that he was, in 2013, the biggest beneficiary of lobbyist expense accounts in the state of Washington. In the first 4 months, every other day he went on either a golfing trip, a meal, or other drinks or other expenses paid by lobbyists. So this guy, who's paid off by multinational corporations, then turns around and says, if you ever dare protest my beloved corporations, I will call you a terrorist. We told you they would abuse the word, and here it is. It's not just national security anymore, now it's economic terrorism, and what is it used for? As an excuse to imprison their political opponents. Welcome to Donald Trump's America. It's only been, what, 9 days. It hasn't even been 10 days yet. And look at these proposals that are flying around. Brace for impact. Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. All right, great tweets as usual here. Smooth writes in, Steve Bannon is more suited to run Stormfront than a position with the federal government. Tom Zawacki says, am I imagining things, or is Trump purposefully filling his cabinet with people more detestable than himself? Good question.
Yeah.
Machos Belgrande writes in, science, reality, and reason are acts of terrorism. Fuck it, I'm a terrorist. Machos, be careful.
Yeah, seriously.
Sabrina Hartman writes in, so what the big banks did to homeowners in 2008, will that be considered economic terrorism?
Nope.
I doubt it.
So interesting that you just mentioned that, because we were just talking about how a lot of the big banks are now rolling out programs that give loans to insanely risky borrowers. So basically, everything that happened in 2008 is slowly but surely happening again with the housing market. I want to do a story on that.
No, she's going to do a story on it. That's what's going to happen.
We are. We're going
to do it.
We're going to do it next week.
We're going to do it. Okay.
Okay.
So, but they destroyed 8 million jobs. They created the Great Recession. A lot of people lost their homes.
Yep.
But that's not economic terrorism. If you block a pipeline for half a minute, that's economic terrorism. Okay. By the way, screw them. Get this shirt instead. Okay. Protect the sacred. Live free.
That's such a badass shirt.
No, I'm sorry. It's a badass shirt, and you know it. That's at shoptyt.com. Christmas is coming. You need to panic over several things. One, TYT gear for Christmas presents, obviously. Secondly, all the Bernie Sanders shirts on January 1st, gone. Auf Wiedersehen. Okay? So hurry up and get the Heisenberg shirts and all those shirts. In fact, I got a new batch, and I'm going to start wearing them on the show because I want to make sure I didn't run out. Okay, shoptyt.com. Go right now. Plus, remember, if you're doing Amazon shopping for Christmas, go to tytnetwork.com, click on the link, bookmark it, do all your Christmas shopping there. It costs you 10 seconds, no money whatsoever, and you help support independent media. All right, what's next?
All right. After the election, many were raising awareness about the issue of fake news sites online, specifically fake news sites that have been shared over and over again on social media platforms like Facebook. Well, there was another force playing a role within this election, and it was Twitter bots. Essentially, bots that spread fake news, and they do it very effectively. And so researchers started looking into this, including some researchers from Oxford University, and they found out that pro-Trump bots played a significant role on Twitter leading up to the election. Now, according to the new memo compiling data from the election by a team of researchers, including Oxford University professor Philip Howard, automated pro-Trump activity actually outnumbered automated pro-Hillary Clinton activity by a 5-to-1 ratio by election day. Now, let me be clear about something. Obviously, the pro-Trump bots were more of an issue, but both parties were still doing it. And I think that that is beyond ridiculous, and it does have an impact on the electorate. Now, the researchers here didn't measure the impact it had. They just simply showed how often it was happening and exactly what they were doing, what the strategy was. Now, Democrats could vote on a different day,
Which is what sometimes they would say.
Yeah, so they would spread misinformation, and this is what it included. Democrats could vote on a different day than Republicans, which of course is not true. Clinton had a stroke during the final week of the election, which again was not true, and that an FBI agent associated with Hillary's email investigation was involved in a murder-suicide. Again, information that was not true, that was debunked by actual legitimate news organizations. Now, of the approximately 18.9 million tweets generated during the last week of the campaign, 55.1% were pro-Trump and 19.1% were pro-Hillary.
Excuse me. Okay, so you'd be surprised how susceptible people are to this. There are a ton of people in this country who really believe that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are literal murderers. Not when Bill Clinton dropped bombs, they like that. No, they go around in the woods and they're like, oh, here's a political opponent, and they cut them all up. So not only just Vince Foster, they spread a specific rumor about how they had an FBI agent and his wife murdered. And it looked like a murder-suicide. He shot the wife and then he killed himself. And like, oh my God, and they include fake news stories, etc. And then the Clintons did it. And then, I'm telling you, this is underestimated. I think that a giant chunk of this country are conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And so when they hear that, that's catnip for them, right? And then they see the FBI reopen the investigation. They're like, I knew it. I knew it. It confirmed for them all the fake memes that they got, by the way, not just on Twitter, but also on Facebook. And look, it's not just the right wing. Let's call it like it is. I know I took a tremendous amount of heat also from liberals when Hillary Clinton had that fainting spell or whatever she had, right? Jank, you're covering for our, you're being a shillery. She's obviously mentally deranged or has massive issues. Well, then why did she sound perfectly lucid in all the debates? Oh, she's got a body double. Now, the liberals weren't stupid enough to believe the body double. I hope not, okay? But they believed that there was something like massively mentally wrong with her, but there wasn't. She's fine. The thing that was wrong with her is she was establishment and didn't know how to appeal to voters, okay? That was the only thing wrong. But people love conspiracy theories. Now, I actually blame Hillary Clinton for not understanding the power of digital media. Now, in this case, the researchers believe that it is likely that it wasn't Trump's campaign itself that did this. Partly it was because Trump's not savvy enough.
They literally said that. They're like, that's a little too brainy for Trump and his camp.
And they asked his campaign, they're like, what? What's a bot? What's a ground game? So now it just might have been tech-savvy Americans, and there are who are libertarians, et cetera, and who wanted to support Trump, and a bunch of guys on Reddit are very smart with this stuff, and then they brag about, we tricked Americans into voting for a monster. Congratulations, by the way, on that. Or, by the way, another theory is, and I don't really care who did it, so like don't get all emotional when I say this word. Ready? Russians. Okay, so it might have been the Russians because they wanted to be involved. They bragged afterwards how they were involved. And so I would see, even on my account, things that I'm like, wait, those tweets look the same.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it wasn't just the Trump people, the Clinton people did too.
Yes, absolutely.
And there was so much crap going on during the election, which, by the way, all of a sudden after the election, I don't have those same tweets of the people. And then there was the tweets that came pretending to be from concerned liberals, but who were actually right-wingers trying to have dissension within the Democratic Party. And all of a sudden, those are gone, too.
Yes.
So by the way, I don't particularly care if it's the Russians or not. It doesn't make it more evil if it's the Russians. It doesn't make it less evil if it's the Russians. But you got to be on the lookout for this because it does exist.
Yeah, the only thing that matters is that it does exist. It certainly exists during this past election, and it had an impact. Again, it's difficult to measure how much of an impact it had, but remember, a lot of people don't rely on mainstream media for their information anymore. A lot of people are cord cutters who don't even have cable anymore. And so they go online and they consume news on social media platforms. And the most difficult part of this to kind of stomach is that social media platforms like Twitter, in the beginning, were great because they were a way to mobilize people. It was a way of spreading important information that wasn't being covered by the mainstream media. A good example of that was when Wendy Davis from Texas did that incredible filibuster of that anti-abortion legislation that was being proposed, right? And so the mainstream media didn't want to cover that, but people were live tweeting it and talking about what was happening with the protests outside and how much of an impact that had. And so now you have bad actors co-opting or taking over these social media platforms to spread misinformation, to spread paranoia, to spread fear, and to have, this disgusting impact on our presidential election. And it's just the fake media, the fake news, and these bots bother me so much more than anything else that went on during this election.
And so, by the way, we're not saying shut them down. We're not saying shut down Facebook and Twitter because there's bad actors on there. We understand there's bad actors in the world. At the same time, we got to give you a heads up on this so you don't believe all that crap that comes in. You've got to ask for a source, right? Just because it's a clever meme doesn't mean that it's true. So, by the way, the other trick that they do is bots. So they'll say, like Donald Trump bragging about millions of people follow me on Twitter. Michael Schur had the best line all the way back in 2012 when Donald Trump was thinking of running back then. He's like, why do you think the American people want you as their president? He's like, I have, at the time, I think it was like 2 million Twitter followers, right? He's like, Snoop Dogg has more.
Yeah.
But by the way, we're now descended into this kind of madness. Maybe he'll run next time. Right now, we have reality stars as presidents. So anyways, So my favorite of those stories was Newt Gingrich. When we found out, I think it was around 90% of his Twitter followers were from Bangladesh.
Newt Gingrich, a big deal in Bangladesh.
Oh yeah, you can't buy a beer in Bangladesh. So meanwhile, so people can't figure out sometimes, like I send a tweet or I retweet and it gets like thousands of retweets and they're like, but you only have like 250,000, you say only 250,000 followers because all these guys buy their followers. So if you're big in media or a big politician, everybody's like, oh, I've got 2 million, I've got 8 million, but it's horse crap, right?
Yes.
So they send a tweet, it gets retweeted by 4 people. You're like, wait, you got 8 million followers that got retweeted 4 times? Right? Whereas our 250,000 for me is real. It's all real people. We ain't got no money to buy no bots. Okay, bots? We're not talking about bots.
Yep.
So, but that goes to your point, Anna, which is that it also has a good side. Because when you mobilize 257,000 people on Twitter, and we got 1.3 million on Facebook. I've got another 250,000 on my own Facebook. On YouTube, we have around 6 million. You mobilize those guys, and that's got power.
Yes.
So you want to use your fake bots? Well, we've got real human beings. I bet they beat your bots. All right, let's have a bot war, right? You have your fake ones, we have our real ones. I bet that we win at that. Now, but it's a mess. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be an easy battle. And these guys are savvy. They do tricks, by the way, like co-opting Hillary's hashtags, like I'm with her, and then put the misinformation in there. They're like, oh, I can't wait to vote on Thursday. I'm with her. Okay. So you think, no, most people aren't going to vote with her. You're right. Most people aren't, but some are. And she lost one of those critical Rust Belt states by 12,000 votes. So it's on, but one of the people who doesn't realize it's on as much, though, is Hillary Clinton. So my last thought is this. She did almost no interviews in digital media. They were on TV a million times. You couldn't turn on cable news without running into Robbie Mook. Okay? And you got Jennifer Palmieri, you had Podesta, you had all these people, let alone everybody else that works in media that were all pro-Hillary anyway, wall to wall. And then digital media, they're like, oh, yeah, I mean, sure. Digital media. Are young people on there? Are progressives on there? No, we're not going to go on digital media. How'd that work out for you? Meanwhile, Trump's bots ate your lunch on digital media. Oops.
Sad.
Baby.
Wrong.
Okay. I retract the baby. And on sad. All right, we go forward.
All right. Now that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States, many students with a considerable amount of student loan debt are wondering what will happen to them. What does Trump plan to do with student loan debt and making college affordable for people who want to go to college in the future? Well, it's really difficult to decipher what he will do because he hasn't been very specific about what he's in favor of and what he plans on dismantling. But we do have little bits and pieces based on what he has said in the past. Now, Trump said throughout his campaign that he wants to do away with the federal student loan program. Now, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives are not in favor of the federal student loan program. They think that that artificially inflates the cost of going to college, which, it does have an impact, but that's not the full reason why student loans and tuition has gone up. But here's what the federal student loan program did do, okay? There were lots of good parts. For one, it keeps the interest rate for repayment low. So students don't have to worry about going to private lenders that usually have, exorbitant fees or interest rates tied to these loans. Now, he also supports moving the federal loan system to private banks, making the student loan system a marketplace and market-driven. So there's also a downside to that. Under the Obama administration, there's something known as the repayment plan. And what they do is they look at your income as someone who has graduated from college and who is now part of the workforce, and they decide, hey, we want to make sure that you don't spend all of your money paying back your student loans. We want to make sure that you have a payment plan set in place to ensure that you still have some disposable income, you still have money left over to be part of the economy and stimulate the economy, you can still live your life. Now, income-based repayments will stay comparable to the Obama administration. Borrowers will pay 12.5% of their income every month. But understand that this is only for federal student loans that already exist. If Donald Trump does away with all federal student loans in the future, meaning you can't get federal student loans in the future, well, then this loan repayment plan won't even exist, because private lenders don't do this. Private lenders are like, you got to pay me. Okay, I don't care about your income. I don't care about any of that stuff. Pay me. Another thing that happens with private banks is it might be a lot more difficult to get a loan, because they might look at your major and they might decide, we're not really into that art major, or we're not really into that sociology major. Oh, you want to be a social worker. Social workers don't make a lot of money, so maybe we're not going to give you the loan necessary for you to get your education. So there's a big problem with that as well.
So for half a second in this story, I thought, is this one of the positive things that Donald Trump at least promised to do? I'd be surprised if he did it, because it sounded wrong, I know, right? Because it sounded like he was arguing against the government making $41 billion from students. Because, for example, Elizabeth Warren has said, hey, why don't we give students the same interest rate we give to top banks, which is near 0%. If they're allowed to borrow at 0%, it's like really 0.25%. Why can't we give it the same rate to students? And of course, everybody flipped out. They're like, how dare you? No, the banks are privileged. Those mere citizens trying to get opportunity in America and live the American dream. No way, right? So I thought, wait, did he do something to try to be populist, fake populist, but he's going to change his mind? Then when you read into it, as Anna pointed out, oh, no, it's a disaster. He says the government shouldn't make that money. My friends in the banking community should make that money.
And they should make way more money in interest than the federal government has made. Now, understand, I hated the fact that the federal government even had interest rates that were higher than what the banks were paying, right? I thought that Elizabeth Warren was spot on in lowering interest rates for federal student loans. But understand that Donald Trump is not in the same camp as Elizabeth Warren. He wants to make sure that you don't have access to low interest rates at all if you're a student. You'd have to go to private banks. And this idea, this notion of like the free marketplace, we all know that that's not the reality. We all know, as past students, as current students, as potential future students who have looked into this, private loans always have a higher interest rate, a significantly higher interest rate.
So the government doesn't have a profit motive, but the banks do. Now, if that profit motive, in my opinion, makes sense in a lot of ways. If you're starting a business, well, the bank needs to make sure that you're going to make money, that we're not running charities here, okay? You're buying a house. It needs to make sure that you can afford the house. So I'm a capitalist. I believe in that. But if it's on the issue of education, so that American citizens have equality of opportunity, not results, opportunity, and we hand it off to the bankers, well, they have no obligation to American citizens. They don't give a damn if you get an education or not. They said, no, now you're playing by my rules. I can charge what I want, and I could punish whichever majors I think are not lucrative enough. And, oh, you're going into public service, whether you're a teacher or maybe a soldier, I don't give a damn what you think you're going to do in public service. Pay me now. You won't get to delay it for any reason.
And finally, during the primaries, both Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, talked about debt forgiveness. Under Trump, debt forgiveness is not a possibility. He does not believe in debt forgiveness whatsoever.
Unless, of course, it's for Donald Trump.
That's exactly right.
His whole career was based on debt forgiveness. He went bankrupt 6 different times. He drove his companies into bankruptcy and then bragged about it. He said, well, once you go into bankruptcy, you don't have to pay your debts. Now, if you say, hey, wait a minute, I was just trying to live the American dream, and it said, I don't care. Here's my American dream for you. I crush you, and you're never allowed to escape those debts, just like I did to become rich. Unbelievable hypocrisy. So the guy who argued against the bankers on the campaign trail, talked about global financial interests on the campaign trail, now says, oh, here you go, bankers. Here's a multi-trillion-dollar market I just handed over to you. Drain the swamp. He is the swamp.
All right. Now time for some international news.
Go.
A British woman who was vacationing in Dubai is now facing charges after she was allegedly raped by two men from the UK. Now, the two men were from the UK, but they were also in Dubai vacationing along with her. And the woman who alleged that she was attacked by the two men in their hotel room after sharing a drink with them was arrested and had her passport confiscated. Now, the woman, who cannot be named for legal reasons, is currently on bail but unable to leave the country unless the charges are dropped or she is able to successfully appeal them in court. Now, why is she facing charges? For having extramarital sex. So, for having sex while she's not married, while she's in Dubai. Do not vacation in Dubai.
Never.
Don't vacation in Dubai. This is a gigantic warning, especially if you're a woman. It means that if you get raped, you are the one who will be blamed for it. The two men were able to fly back to the UK. No charges, no punishment, no nothing. That's what happened to those two men. This woman, she has to wait months until she stands trial on these charges.
So we often speak out against the Gulf countries because their leaders practice fundamentalist Islam. And then I will, from time to time, hear a defense of them. But no, Cenk, they have these beautiful cities. By the way, oftentimes built by slave labor. So I hope you're enjoying those beautiful cities. They will bring in Pakistanis, other Muslims, by the way, and non-Muslims. They'll take away their passports so they can't leave and make them work for wages they didn't agree to, slave labor, okay? And then they will do this to their own citizens, and they'll do it to people who aren't their citizens. Oh, but Cenk, they have such lovely malls. I'm not interested in their goddamn malls, okay? So in this case, think about how atrocious this is. And I can't believe the UK would tolerate this for 1 second. Don't give me any nonsense about a cultural argument. Look, I defend Muslims all the time because they're human beings and there's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. And they're not monolithic. They don't all agree on one interpretation of Islam. But if you believe in this interpretation of Islam and you are the ruler of a country and you imprison women who have been raped, well, then I got a bone to pick with you, okay? And you can say that's your culture. Okay, then I can say my culture is I never, ever do business with you. Okay? Oh, I got a cultural argument. You got a cultural argument? I got one too. Okay? How about the UK stops doing every penny of business with the United Arab Emirates? How about we never buy your oil again? I know they're not going to want to do that either because the government in the West, certainly including America, are in bed with these Gulf countries. Oh, I got to have the cheap oil. I got to have the cheap oil. Go ahead, rape the woman and then imprison them. Now, in this case, they didn't rape the woman, but the woman who was raped, go ahead and imprison her, okay?
Yep.
And let me explain just real quick what they lean on to do this. In their interpretation of Islam, which is not shared by everyone in Islam, it is not practiced in Turkey. It's not practiced in Indonesia, in so many other places. Now there'll be people like, oh no, but I heard in a poll there was 3.5% in Indonesia who believe this. Okay, we're talking about, in this case, a Gulf country who does practice it, okay? So their interpretation is, well, you need 4 witnesses to convict anybody on anything. Now, we don't have 4 witnesses on the rape because they raped her in private. Sad day. So the guys who've been accused, you're free to go. Now, why did they imprison the woman? Well, you admitted it. By saying you were raped, you admitted having sex outside of marriage. So I don't need 4 witnesses. So you're going to prison.
It's amazing.
That is so gross.
And this is not an isolated incident. This keeps happening over and over again in the UAE. In fact, Australian Alicia Gale was jailed for 8 months after reporting a rape to authorities in the UAE back in 2008. And then in 2009, British woman Roxanne Hiller spent 3 months in jail in the UAE after it was claimed she slept with her boss. And so you're putting yourself in danger when you go to a country like this that punishes women like this. Because, again, it gives questionable people, men who would want to rape women, the ability and the entitlement to go ahead and do it. They don't have to worry about any of the charges. And then you as a woman have no way of protecting yourself because you can't go report it. If you report it, you're the one who's going to suffer the consequences, not the person who allegedly raped you. It's scary.
I know people who go to the Gulf countries, but I'm sorry, I think you're nuts. If you're a woman, you're taking your life into your hands because they don't care about you. You're not a citizen to them. To them, you're just a person to exercise power over. I'm not putting it on everybody in the UAE, but I am putting it on their government. Their government, by the way, they think they're so great. Why? Because they happen to be sitting on top of a lot of, in the Gulf, natural gas and oil. Wow, that makes you so special. You didn't earn anything, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then, despite the fact that you're that wealthy, you still built your cities based on slave labor. I got no interest in the Gulf countries. I think you're nuts to go visit them if you're going to go visit them. You don't get it. They might look like the West, but they're not. Their rulers are fundamentalists, and you're playing with your life when you go to them. And in the UK, the fact that you have not pulled every economic deal with the UAE for every day that she's in jail, that is atrocious. You should immediately send your ambassador there and say, if I don't have her with me when I leave this meeting, there's not going to be a single goddamn contract that we're ever going to do with the UAE again. Don't fight phantoms that aren't there. Fight the real injustices that actually exist. This is real. Go fix it. All right, let's take a quick break. We still have more stories, and unfortunately, that now are bad guys. The white supremacists here in America and the insane shit they're doing. We'll tell you that when we come back. Okay, so some great tweets again. Trav Daddy O writes in, is there a way to give the gift of membership to TYT? Oh, that's such a good question. And for now, the answer is I don't know. Okay, so you know how to sign up, tytnetwork.com/join. I will look into the gift option for you guys and get back to you as soon as possible. By the way, I just realized next week's Thanksgiving. That means next Friday is Black Friday. Do not do Christmas shopping on Amazon without using our link. You can do Christmas shopping anywhere you want, but if you're doing it on Amazon, tytnetwork.com, go to the link, bookmark the link, okay?
Oh, God, Christmas is coming.
I know, it's okay.
It's so expensive.
Okay, just gift of membership to TYT, not that expensive. We'll get that information to you guys soon. All right, the Drunken Monk says, if they are such killers about the Clintons, why couldn't the Clintons ever take out the people really opposing them? They had 30 years. Yeah, wait a minute. How come James Comey's still alive? So dumb. Okay, Tensai Badger says, my dad barely watches news now, but he used to during the 90s. He ended up voting for Trump because he thought Hillary was another Nixon. Well, if he's looking for another Nixon, congratulations, he just voted for one. Gabby Marita says, we've sunk to a point where someone going on trial over for-profit college fraud is now being relied on to fix student debt crisis.
By the way,
that's such a good point.
We didn't even get to this. So under the Obama administration, there was a regulation known as gainful employment that would ensure that, these schools that make the majority of their revenue through federal student loans, give students an education necessary to graduate and get gainful employment, right? And it was a way of combating these for-profit colleges that prey on students and basically scam them. Donald Trump wants to get rid of that regulation.
Yep. No, but her point, Gabby's point about how he's literally going to court for doing a scam university.
Yep.
Now he's going to say, no, you can't get out of your student debt. Okay, and then finally, along similar lines, Tazilin writes in, fine, if we go for private loans, then we allow students to declare bankruptcy, like our future president did 6 times. Fair is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, private loans, okay. Then we can declare bankruptcy on private loans. There's no reason in the world we should be not allowed to declare bankruptcy on a private loan. The whole rationale was it's a government loan, so you can't declare bankruptcy. What now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, last 2 stories for you guys. They're doozies.
All right. A woman in California was the target of a hate crime after she went on a long peace hike and returned back to her car to find a hateful note. Her name is Nikki Pancali, And just take a look at this video to see what she found.
On Monday, Nikki shared this cell phone video on social media after her 48th hike.
There's glass pieces everywhere.
Someone broke into her car, stole her purse, and left a note.
They had mistaken me as an Islamic woman.
Nikki suffers from lupus and wears a bandana for sun protection. Whoever wrote the hate message assumed she was Muslim. It said in part, "This is our nation. Get the F out."
I would be lying if I said I didn't feel a bit of fear.
Officials with the East Bay Regional Park District say car break-ins happen often, but say reports of hate crimes are extremely rare.
It's, obviously that kind of hate speech, intolerance, discrimination is not tolerated in our parks at all under any circumstances.
Today, Nikki says she plans to finish 17 peace hikes in the next couple of weeks, with the Muslim community in mind.
My reaction is utter sadness. I feel for the people that are in reception of this hate.
Yep.
She says that her religion is, of course, not Islam, but she says her religion is love. And it's so ironic that it happened to her. She had dedicated that particular hike to collective harmony. And then she comes back and sees that note.
Yep.
I think pretty much the definition of irony there. Also, it might not have worked.
Hijab wearing bitch, this is our nation now. Get the fuck out. That's the note that she came back to. By the way, this story, I think, perfectly highlights the ignorance of those who are bigoted and hateful and racist, right? It's this culture of fear, and that fear comes from the ignorance. Like the others, they're so afraid of the others. She's not even Muslim, right? And even if she was Muslim, there's no evidence that she's violent or scary or someone you should be paranoid about. You just buy into the rhetoric that's being spewed by people like Donald Trump, right? Think about how sad that life is.
Well, she actually recognizes that.
Yeah.
But they're so paranoid. They think, 41-year-old woman going on peaceful hikes, that's a danger. Meanwhile, they just robbed her. So these are the same guys who are like, the criminals and the rapists are coming in from Mexico. Let's go smash her car, leave a really hateful note, and rob her. Let's take her purse. Who's the criminals again? So she's a much, much better person than I am. So Nikki Pacioli, when asked about this, said that, those guys obviously must be in some degree of pain. Otherwise, why would you do this to anybody? And she said that she's going to pray for their well-being.
She's definitely a better person than I am.
That's not the first thought I would have had.
No.
And so I think, God bless her, literally, I guess. I'm not sure her prayers are working, and that's part of why I'm agnostic. But I love her attitude.
Yeah, definitely. I wish her the best.
Yeah.
All right. The Miami New Times is reporting on a man who feels like he has been discriminated against from a local Starbucks or at a local Starbucks. Now, the man in question is a white individual who was very angry at the fact that it was taking a really long time for him to get his coffee. Now, he started hurling Trump's name at black employees who he accused of anti-white discrimination because his coffee was delayed, witnesses said. Another customer called the man an asshole, okay, and he replied, "Fuck you, bitch." And that's when one of the witnesses by the name of George de Cardenas began recording. So we have the video for you. Take a look.
Just give us our money back. We want nothing to do with you. I'm at Starbucks. You're complete mark. You're trash.
So what?
Because I voted for Trump.
So what? What do you want?
Trump.
Congratulations.
You lost. Now give me my money back.
I love how this white guy in his sweater vest is like, everyone's discriminating against me because my coffee is taking a while. Sit the fuck down, homeboy. Your coffee's coming, okay? Not this victimhood that these insanely insecure white men are feeling in the country right now is hilarious to me. Really? Your coffee's taking too long, so you're experiencing white discrimination or anti-white discrimination?
I took it slightly different. He thought I voted for Trump. I should get my coffee ahead of you. Because he thought, no, I'm being serious. In his mind, he made some assumption. Played out right there. I'm not putting, anything out there that isn't in the video and described by all the witnesses. So he thought, well, isn't the country back to me being in charge and me having privileges over you? Why am I waiting in line with you guys? Because this all started when he thought he should have gotten his coffee above others, before others.
I don't know if that's true.
That was the sense I got from the Miami New Times description of it. Mm-hmm. So he says it took longer than he believed it should have. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
That
it was just delayed.
It was just longer.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the statement of I voted for Trump, so I should have my coffee whenever I want, is such a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
And now, would he have yelled at that person if they were white? I don't know.
Probably not, because he felt
why would it matter that you voted for Trump then?
He felt like this was anti-white discrimination. The fact that his coffee took a while to make was anti-white discrimination. Look, I used to work at a coffee shop. I worked at a coffee bean and tea leaf. And sometimes, especially in the morning, especially if you're understaffed, I don't know what the situation was at this Starbucks. It takes a while, right? You get backed up on orders. Maybe you're a new employee and you're at the coffee bar and you're trying to get things done. And you're just backed up, and it happens. There are delays, and people get really angry about it, right? I had someone throw a latte at me because I didn't make it right. So you experience customers who act, crazy because they haven't gotten their coffee at the exact moment that they wanted it or the exact way that they wanted it. But to say I voted for Trump repeatedly and then accuse others of anti-white discrimination, it kind of hit me. There are people in this country who feel like their lives are out of control, like they can't get everything they want when they want it, and they're looking for a scapegoat. And for them, the scapegoat is racial equality. They're like, fuck everyone else, I should be number one. Fuck everyone else, I should have the privileges. And I think that's why some people they fight back and they reject the notion of white privilege and they deny that it exists, right? Because they probably know it does exist and they like it. They hate the equality.
So if you're thinking we made this racial, remember, the employees are black, he's white. Okay. He not only said I voted for Trump, he said, you lost. Now give me my money back. Now, why did he assume that they voted against Trump and why they lost? Did he ask them how they voted while he was waiting in line? There's no evidence of that. Mm-hmm. Certainly not in the video. Because in his mind, it's racial. Now, if you say, hey, look, if you look at the percentages of African Americans and whites and educated, non-educated, and you want to make some generalizations, I understand. I'm not unaware of the percentages. But in his world, mm-hmm. It's us versus them. You lost. If you're black, you lost. I won. I voted for Trump. I get to have my coffee on time. Okay? And by the way, one of the other workers who's Latino, he said, the funny thing, besides just the concept of anti-white discrimination, is just yelling Trump for no reason, he said. Dude, you won.
I know. But you know what? I have to say this. The guy in that video who's yelling and losing his mind over his coffee taking too long is a sad, sad man, right? He's not a happy person. He's not living a good life. I don't know much about him, but you can just tell from that video and how he lost it that he's just not a happy person. Even after his candidate of choice won, he's not a happy person and he's miserable.
And that's why he voted for Trump, because he's mad.
Yeah.
He's like, I want my privileges back.
He wants a scapegoat and he wants a reason or someone to blame for him not being happy. But even after Trump won and even seeing him being as miserable as he is, I have to say, I feel pleasure in seeing him miserable because that's what he deserves. I do, right? Because it's just, I know.
So, no, look, there are people that are better than us. So, for example, I talk about Martin Luther King all the time in this respect. He said, I went down to the South not to just liberate African Americans from the oppression they were living under. I did it to also liberate the white racists that were down there. Not everybody was racist, but back then a big percentage were. But he said, of the racists, those particular people, he said, I wanted to liberate them from the hatred in their heart. Because they have to live with that.
Yeah.
And he's like, do you know how bad it is to live with that hatred in your heart?
Yeah, it sucks.
And so, what a great, great man that he's like, I came to liberate you both. So now, for us, we're not as great.
No, absolutely not.
And one of the things that I worry about when I see a guy like that is, you know, he's got good clothes on. He seems like a well put together guy.
Sweet sweater vest.
And he's probably somebody's boss in some way, you know, middle management or whatever it is. Now, if you're an African American working under that guy or a Latino, you think you're going to get a fair shake? Take that anger, take the assumptions he has, I won, you lost, right? And then put that in the work environment. That's scary. So I'm sorry, I'm nowhere near as good as MLK, but that guy feeling triumphant is an issue.
Oh, we're so out of time.
I know. Okay, all right. Okay, super last thing. So what is it about Starbucks that drives white right-wingers crazy?
I don't know, man.
They didn't
I don't
write.
know.
Yeah, they didn't write Merry Christmas on my coffee. They wrote joy. They wrote joy. You're protesting joy. So this was a story out of last year's Christmas season, right?
Yep.
And why do we have to say Merry Christmas to you?
There was some sort of drama involving the color of coffee cups this year. Apparently, I don't know the story specifically, but like something about how they weren't red, they were green, and then like Tommy Lauren needed something to cry about, so she cried about that.
Yeah, and they didn't have enough Christmas decorations.
Where are our cups? Like the cups are not the color they should be, and then Black lives don't matter.
And so you Muslims, because there's a lot of Muslims running Starbucks. Are you Muslims and atheists and Jews? You should be forced to say Merry Christmas to me. Yeah, that puts me in a real giving mood. That puts me in the holiday spirits when I am forced to bow down to your religion.
Yep.
The one that I do not share.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, they keep talking about Starbucks. Now, not in this case. This guy's just mad at random black people, right? But in that other story, the CEO of Starbucks and the founder is Jewish. So they're saying, no, I don't care what your religion is. You say Merry Christmas, damn it. How could they not see how, one, discriminatory that is, but also how silly that sounds. Say Merry Christmas! What the fuck, right? It's supposed to be a good time. You're fucking Christmas up. We all used to like Christmas until you made it some weird authoritarian thing. Bring back Santa. And everybody get a grande latte. Okay. Why is it called latte? That sounds foreign. And what does Vendi mean anyway? That totally sounds Spanish. What happened to small, medium, and large? Look at America. Let's make America large again. Let's make America Christmas again. Okay, that was a random ending.
Yeah, it really was, but I liked it.
Okay, so in the post game for the members, I'm going to tell you how I'm a little crazy. I don't know.
They didn't know. Okay.
No, they didn't. It's breaking news. Okay. Breaking news. You wonder if I say stuff that I say on the show in real life. I got a great story for you guys on that. It's a shout story, but it's a good one. tytnetwork.com/join. And if you join, you'll get the full Aggressive Progressives on tonight as well. Bye-bye.
Vaping is getting uber popular because a lot of people think it's healthier than smoking.
Yeah, because we're not sucking in burning flames.
Yeah, you're not. But does that mean it's healthier?
Yes.
You're exactly right. Well, kinda. Not really. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Most people smoke cigarettes to ingest the chemical nicotine because they're addicted to it. Some people smoke cigarettes to de-stress or look cool, but mostly it's just because they're addicted. Anyway, the nicotine is released by burning tobacco, and the nicotine acts like caffeine and makes you more alert, and it releases dopamine to lift your mood. But the problem with smoking cigarettes is that the research shows that, well, they kill you. The smoke itself sends partially combusted chemicals into your body and puts tar in your lungs, and it also blackens teeth and it smells gross.
And cancer. Don't forget the cancer.
Yeah, that. So the thing with vaping is that it doesn't burn tobacco like cigarettes. It heats the tobacco to a controlled temperature, so there's much less smoke. And it often uses a liquid solution of water, nicotine, a base, and flavorings.
So less smoke means vaping is less bad?
Generally speaking, studies from the UK and Europe, links in the description as always, suggest that vaping is over 90% healthier than smoking. But the thing is, there's other factors to consider. With vaping, manufacturers are now introducing new things that aren't present in cigarettes, like propylene glycol. Propylene glycol isn't in cigarettes, but it is in vaping fluid. It's used as a base to dilute the nicotine and help it vaporize consistently. But it also can cause irritation to the eyes and lungs. And flavorings, which mean you can make vaping fluid in all sorts of new flavors like green apple and Coca-Cola and cinnamon. But getting these flavors means using chemicals like diacetyl and cinnamonaldehyde. Both aren't great if inhaled in large doses. So which flavors are safe to vape? Well, we haven't had a chance to study them all yet because so many new flavors are coming onto the market, so we're not exactly sure. It's potentially risky. And because we haven't had very long to study vaping, the early research is often conflicting. For example, this year, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, probably one of the most reliable science sources in the whole world, profiled 3 studies that suggest vaping may actually be worse than smoking. One study looked at the DNA of smokers versus the DNA of vapers. They looked at almost 600 genes that are known to protect our body, fight infection, and ward off cancer. In smokers, 53 of these genes were depressed, which is one of the reasons why smokers are more prone to cancer. Their cancer-fighting genes were turned off. But in people who vape, it was 358 genes that were affected. So at a genetic level, maybe vaping could be more damaging than cigarettes. A second study in mice showed vapors led to hyperactivity, and scientists are exploring the connection between vaping and mental illness. A third study of mice showed far lower sperm counts in the mice who had been exposed to vapors from e-cigarettes. These are just links that have been observed. They've only been established by correlation, not causation, and the studies are brand new, so we haven't had a chance to reproduce them.
So to vape
or not to vape?
Well, I guess it's up to you what your risk tolerance is. The best science we have available suggests vaping is definitely more dangerous than not smoking at all. So if you're a non-smoker who buys like paraben-free toothpaste and GMO-free food because you're worried they have freaky chemicals that haven't been tested enough, then you definitely shouldn't be vaping. But if you crave delicious, delicious nicotine and you're looking for a healthier alternative to smoking, then switching to e-cigarettes might be an option to consider. Maybe.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching SciQ and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.
Hey guys, we got to 10,000 subs! Yes, sucked intro! Thank you for being our subs, we love you guys! And so to celebrate in true SciQ style, let's bust 5 science myths in less than 5 minutes.
Myth number 1, is urine sterile and can you drink it? Well, despite this awesome scene from Fight Club, urine is not sterile. Normal, healthy people will have a colony of bacteria hanging out in their bladder. The myth comes from your urine test for urinary tract infections. If you get a negative on your UTI test, it doesn't mean that you actually tested negative for bacteria. It just means your bacteria levels are below the threshold for an infection. But since the amount of bacteria in healthy human urine is pretty low, you could drink it. What? It's iced tea. Milk is good for your bones. Okay, let's get one thing straight. The food pyramid is bunk. It's a lie. It was designed by companies with corporate interests in what gets put in your shopping trolley, like the dairy industry. Conventional wisdom says that dairy products help build strong bones by providing calcium. But milk is just one of many, many sources of calcium. Dark leafy green vegetables and some types of legumes are some of the other sources. And there's some important reasons why milk might not be the best source for everyone. The truth is that the bioavailability of calcium in milk isn't even that high. And there's other factors like exercise and protein and vitamin D intake that are far more important for bone health. Myth 3, brain cells can't regenerate. Many people think that we're born with all the brain cells we're ever going to have, or all the neurons we're ever going to have, and once they're gone for good. But science shows brain cells can regrow. Researchers at Cornell University have demonstrated that cells from the hippocampus, the part of your brain essential for learning and memory, can regenerate in a laboratory dish. Now there's something to toast to. Myth number 4, there's no gravity in space. Yale researchers have found that yes, there is actually gravity in space, and there's lots of it. And it's true that as you travel further away from the Earth, its gravitational pull weakens. However, the pull fades away pretty slowly, and the gravity never fully goes away. Gravity is everywhere in space. The objects that are in space are continuously falling towards a galactic center. Now you might be thinking, how did astronauts float about while they're in space? Well, these astronauts are in the midst of an orbit around the Earth, so they're not experiencing no gravity, or they would fly off into space. They're actually experiencing a ton of gravity, but they don't have anything in their tracks to stop them. This concept is known as free falling, and it's why you get the feeling of weightlessness when you're in outer space. So although a penny is made out of hard copper, it's extremely difficult for a penny to transform into a deadly weapon. Even if it is tossed off a building as high as the Empire State Building, a penny is far too flat and small in size to kill you, and on its way down to the ground, it's buffered by far too many air particles. Plus, it reaches terminal velocity, which means it can't go any faster. It's the end of the acceleration. So it's not like it gets faster and faster as it drops. It reaches a certain speed, and then that's as fast as it's going to get. So because of all this air resistance and because of terminal velocity, the penny would actually just drift to the ground like an autumn leaf. Lewis Bloomfield, a physicist at the University of Virginia, says that if you happened to be walking on the sidewalk at the time of the penny's descent and the penny did end up hitting you, it would feel kind of like someone lightly flicked you on the head. So now it's back to you guys. Which myth did you think was real? I was pretty surprised by the urine being sterile one. I'd always thought that it was actually sterile. Did you have any other myths that you'd like us to bust? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for getting us to 10,000 subscribers. You guys help us to be able to do what we do, and we'll see you on the way to 100,000.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching SciQ, and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.
So every election year since 2008, there's a campaign in the science community called Sci Debate, where everyone in science begs the candidates to please have a debate about all the issues that have to do with science. You know, just small issues like climate change, medical research, vaccines, NASA, GMOs, gun violence. Anyway, after almost a year of campaigning by the entire science profession, including a petition we asked you all to sign, it seems that we're not going to get the science debate we wanted. But that doesn't mean the candidates haven't commented on the science issues on the public record. So we've researched all their public statements, and we bring you Hillary versus Trump on the big science issues. Trump hates Obamacare and says he will replace it, but he just hasn't said anything about how he will do it. There's no plans or anything. One thing to note is that most medical research funding is tied to Obamacare. So what medical research gets cut as part of this scrap Obamacare plan is anyone's guess. Trump has also sent some mixed messages when it comes to medical science. He's talked and tweeted many times about the now disproven link between vaccines and autism. If I were president, I would push for proper vaccinations, but would not allow one-time massive shots that a small child cannot take. Autism. He tweeted back in March 2014. And during the height of the Ebola crisis in 2014, he directly went against the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization, the governing health authorities, when he went on a Twitter rant and said we should stop flights from affected countries. He warned that the plague will start and spread inside our borders. But Trump, however, is very supportive of his own Trump brand of medical research. Yes, he once owned a vitamin network, a network marketing company that sold vitamin supplements. The company got people to submit their urine for tests, and then the tests would be run to demonstrate what supplements they were lacking. And then Trump Vitamins would send a special supplement mix back to the people to get amazing health. Investigations found that Trump's network had never tested whether the theory worked, and their products weren't submitted to the FDA.
Hillary wants to stick with Obamacare and has laid out a specific 5 and 10-point plan to boost Alzheimer's, autism, HIV, and AIDS research. In terms of vaccines, Hillary is with the scientific consensus, saying the earth is round, the sky is blue, and vaccines work. Love your poetry there, Hillary. Oh, and she hasn't launched any vitamin companies. Yet. Climate change. Trump does not believe that humans play a major role in climate change and has called global warming a hoax. Clinton supports the science on climate change, though we may squabble with her individual policy positions. Energy. While some of Trump's views on energy are pretty inconsistent, he said he doesn't like oil reliance, but then he supports fossil fuels? He does believe that both natural gas and nuclear power should be a part of America's energy equation. Great. The Democratic Party's track record on sustainable energy is, I guess, not great. They've given billions of dollars in kickbacks to oil and gas companies. Clinton herself appears modestly in favor of fracking, like pumping chemicals into the ground to get the gas. And the Democratic Party also supports exporting more gas, which means more fracking. NASA and space. Trump's never said what he would do in regards to NASA, but he did say that he'd like a private space program, maybe even better than a public space program, which either means he wants to pull public funding from NASA or give Richard Branson a run for his money. Hillary Clinton is pretty supportive of the space program, and she's outlined leadership in space science as part of her plan to raise American incomes. She thinks that space exploration could be the next big win for the American economy. GMOs. Trump hasn't said a whole lot about GMOs, surprisingly, but what he has tweeted is a little disconcerting. When Ben Carson took a lead in the Iowa polls, Trump tweeted, #Ben Carson is now leading the hashtag polls in hashtag Iowa. Too much hashtag Monsanto in the hashtag corn creates issues in the brain? Well, what the hell does he mean? Given that Monsanto is one of the biggest manufacturers of genetically modified foods, he's implying that GMOs cause brain damage, which is of course not supported by research or even basic biology. Hillary Clinton has expressed support for genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. You go, girl! She said that there's a big gap between what the facts are and what perceptions are. So it sounds like she understands GMO science at least a little bit, but she has been supportive of letting states force GMO labels onto food, which just goes to show, just because she understands the issue doesn't mean she's going to make evidence-based policy if elected. Now, this is not a comprehensive list. If we were to do a comprehensive list, this video would go on forever. And as always, we encourage you to do your own research. But we've provided all the source links in the description below. What do you guys think? Who's your favorite candidate on science issues? And are there any electoral science issues that concern you that we haven't mentioned here? It is election season after all, and we'd love to cover them. Let us know in the comments below.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching SciQ, and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.
The world is a scary place. There's bad guys everywhere, and owning a gun is the only solution. At least that's what the NRA tell you. It's like their main defense against gun regulation. When a mass shooting happens, they're like, well, if all the 5-year-olds had had guns, someone would have shot the shooter instead of being slaughtered. We need more guns, not less. Our potential new vice president, Donald Trump's running mate, Mike Pence, is a huge believer that guns make us safer. He actually said it in a speech to the Indiana Congress. He said, firearms in the hands of law-abiding citizens make our communities more safe and not less. And average Americans believe that guns make you safer. A 2014 Gallup poll showed that around 2/3 of Americans think having a gun in the house makes it a safer place to be. But could it be that more guns does make us safer? So it turns out our confidence in guns is woefully misguided. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that guns leave everybody less safe, including their owners. And this is not my opinion. These are the facts. And if you're a gun fan, I want you to watch the end of this video and then ask yourself if you still believe that guns make you safer. The question of, do guns make a nation safer, has been tested multiple times. One study published in the highly reputable American Journal of Medicine looked at 27 developed countries to see if there was a relationship between guns and safety. They found no correlation between guns per capita per country and the crime rate, meaning that if you add more guns to the population, you don't do much to affect the amount of crime. But what they found was a significant positive correlation between the number of guns in the population and firearm-related deaths. Basically, the more guns, the more people who die of gun injuries. That same American Journal of Medicine study also found that gun ownership was a strong predictor of gun death. Basically, if you own a gun, you're more likely to be killed by a gun. A 1993 study published in none other than the New England Journal of Medicine found that just the presence of a firearm in the house makes it 3 times more likely that someone will be murdered by an intimate partner or a family member, usually during arguments. Basically, if you have a gun in the home, you're way more likely to be murdered or to murder someone else or to kill yourself. And by the way, this study was repeated in 2003 and it came to the same conclusion. Regardless of your storage practices for the gun or the type of gun you have, just having any gun in the home means an increased risk of firearm homicide and firearm suicide. This was again supported by a study from Boston University's School of Public Health, which found that every time you increase the number of gun owners in a population by 1%, you see a 1.1% increase in gun murders and a 0.7% increase in total murders. Not a single published study in a single reputable journal has refuted these statistics. Not one. But I know you trolls are going to tell me I'm wrong, so I dare you, I f***ing dare you, to link to any study that proves me wrong, and I will enjoy tearing it to absolute shreds. And in particular, I dare you to link to this study published in the conservative, student-edited Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, and it was written by 2 gun-toting nutjobs. I f***ing dare you. We all like to think that we should be able to defend ourselves, just in case that burglar really did break into our home. But the truth is that legal, defensive gun use is extremely rare. So why is this myth that guns make us safer still allowed to exist when there's overwhelming evidence against it? What do you guys think? I know you're going to let me know, so go nuts in the comments below.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching SciQ and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.
Guess what? Girls are experiencing puberty earlier. I know, right? Okay, so here's a quick timeline. In 1860, around when my grandmother's grandmother, Margaret Ross, was born, what a babe, girls hit puberty at around 16 years old. By the time my grandmother, Nana Heather, was born, that age had dropped to 14 years old. And when my mummy, Mama Sheens, was born, that average age had dropped to around 10 years old. And today, if I'd had a baby, baby Jade would have hit puberty at around 9 years old, which would have been considered freakishly early, even 100 years ago when my great-great-grandmother Margaret was alive. Now, I know what you're gonna say.
Duh, we already know this. It's because they're eating chicken, which has hormones in it.
And to this I say, no, we don't put hormones in chicken in the US. It's not legal. We explain this in another video.
So if it's not hormones, then why?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So why are kids, specifically girls, hitting puberty super duper early? Well, this is the problem. Science doesn't really have any idea why it's happening.
Why doesn't science have any idea? Isn't that the whole point of science?
Beck, shut up with the questions. I'm gonna tell you why. Okay, so the reason science doesn't have any idea why this is happening is because it's a really tricky problem. We can't just take 2 babies and raise one in the 1860s and one in the modern times. You just couldn't simulate an 1860s environment. And even if you could, or if you had a time machine, the ethics committee has to approve all scientific studies and they'd never agree to it because, like, they didn't even have antibiotics back in the 1860s.
Ouch.
And they didn't have much hygiene either, really.
Ew.
And plus, even if it was ethical to make them travel back in a time machine and deny them basic health and hygiene, you couldn't lock a kid up for 16 years to run experiments on them. That would be unethical. So because science can't do a proper controlled study on this stuff, we can only try and look at correlations. Like, for example, obesity. See, there's more fat kids than ever before, and puberty is happening earlier than ever before, so maybe having more fat on our bodies at an earlier age might have something to do with it. That's what scientists at the Virginia School of Medicine suggested in 2010. Or maybe it's all the stresses of the modern education system. That's what scientists at the University of Texas discussed in 2007. Or maybe it's all the chemicals we have in our environment now, like BPA, which is a chemical that can mimic estrogen and is found everywhere in plastics, paper, canned food, receipts, all that sort of stuff. That's what scientists in Turkey suggested in 2011.
Okay, so we don't know why girls are hitting puberty early, but so what? I mean, does it really even matter?
Well, here's the problem. This change, hitting puberty 7 years earlier than normal, might be no big deal. But it might also be a sign of something absolutely catastrophic. We don't know what's causing this change. It could be that there's some chemical in our environment that's slowly f***ing up our whole reproductive cycle, leading to widespread infertility and will ultimately kill us all. Or it could be no big deal. We just don't know.
I mean, early puberty is kind of weird, but it's hardly going to be like apocalyptic, right?
Well, probably not. But early puberty just sucks for the kids dealing with it. Think of it, half of all 9-year-old girls are now growing boobs and some are starting to have their periods. That's just super duper early for their body to be changing compared to how mature their mind is. It's really young for girls to be dealing with tampons and understanding periods and pregnancy and what sex is and all of that stuff. But in addition to the psychological element, early puberty can also be bad for your health later in life. What science does know is that girls who hit puberty have a 30% increase in risk of breast cancer later in life. They're also more likely to get pregnant as teenagers, suffer from HPV, heart disease, diabetes, and something called all-cause mortality, which just means that they're going to die earlier from anything. That sucks. Early puberty ain't great for your mental health either. Girls who develop earlier are at a greater risk of depression, are more likely to drink, smoke, and have sex earlier. Now, that's not to say early puberty causes all of those problems, but there are some disturbing correlations. So in conclusion, girls are hitting puberty earlier, and science really has no idea why. What do you guys think? Are you worried about kids becoming adults sooner than they used to? Or do you have your own ideas about why it's happening? Let us know in the comments below.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching SciQ and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.
So we know from statistics that Democrats are more likely than Republicans to have a higher education, but research now shows that lower intelligent people are more likely to vote Republican. Research published in Psychological Science found a correlation between low intelligence in childhood and holding racist views in adulthood, as well as a tendency to vote for conservative parties. This doesn't mean that every person with low intelligence grows up to become a Republican, but it does mean that there is a correlation between lower intelligence and having conservative views. The researchers speculated that people with lower intelligence have more trouble dealing with abstract ideas. They find it more difficult to understand things that have subtleties and things that are different to them. Now, don't get me wrong, this study by no means suggests that all liberals are geniuses and all conservatives are idiots. But what it shows is that people with a lower intelligence are more likely to be attracted to simplistic and self-centered ideologies around the world. So for example, if they are a straight person, they find